Welcome back to the Armchair Attorney Podcast. I am your host, Matthew Leffler, the Armchair Attorney. Oh, what a journey it has been. We started doing this podcast in 2022, nearly 100 episodes in. We've talked to judges, we've talked to lawyers, we've talked to executives, we've talked to technologists, and we continue these conversations, fleeting though they may be. I am excited for you today. I cannot tell you how excited I am. There's a few technology companies that you should know. And today's company, you will when this is all said and done. But before we can bring on my good friend Ryan Joyce of GenLogs, I got to do a quick shout out to my friends over at DAT, Dial Truck. Since 1978, DAT has helped truckers find loads. Now helping brokers find loads, moving things across America. Here's the reality. Nothing arrives without a truck. 70, 80% of all things that you buy come on a truck. And for a very long time, DAT has helped motor carriers get stuff done. So I'm very happy to have them as a partner for our podcast, sitting atop the pallid bust of Apollo, somewhat adjacent to my chamber door. Now, last week, I had the unique opportunity to speak at the Motor Carrier Insurance Education Foundation. We need to help our motor carriers in every way that we can. This market is interesting, competitive, one might say. But here's the reality. Driving a truck is one of the most common jobs across America. Millions of people do this every single day, and yet it remains the top 10, actually number 8, most dangerous job in the country. And out there is a regulator who's in charge of the safety of motor carriers, the FMCSA, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. Now, the FMCSA has a budget of about $1 billion. That's billion with a B. And they are tasked to regulate 500,000 motor carriers, 25,000 freight brokers, 4,000 interstate bus companies, and millions of commercial vehicle operators. And yet, the vast majority of freight moves on small trucking companies, and those small trucking companies don't have a lot of visibility. People don't necessarily know a lot about them. How many inspections have they had by the federal authorities? Maybe not many. But there's a new technology that's coming out, that's been out, and now quickly gaining adoption across the United States. That company is run by my good friend, Ryan Joyce. The company's called GenLogs. GenLogs has done something truly unique in the space of transportation, and I use that very specifically. What they do is not your typical tracking and visibility from cell phones or ELDs or telematics. It is something altogether different. And what they are doing to help people recover freight, to find assets, and so much more is truly astonishing. So this conversation has been a long time coming, and I continue to delay because that's what I do. I'm a delay expert. No, I kid you. Please allow me to introduce my good friend, Ryan Joyce. Ryan, how are you?
Matthew, I'm doing great, man. And you could have just kept on speaking. I could just listen to that smooth sounds of Matthew Leffler for hours there. But no, it's good to be joining you on the show today.
This has been a long time coming. I have been following your company, GenLogs, since you guys have been out. But for those who haven't, who are you? What do you do?
Yeah, GenLogs, we've been around for just about 2 years now, although we didn't really get our full running start until I would say just about a year ago. What GenLogs is at its very core is we have built a nationwide network of sensors along all major interstates, freight lanes, and highways that is collecting on all motor carrier traffic on the roads all the time. Now, when we say collecting, each one of our sensors that we put there's video cameras involved that collect on the front, side, and rear of a truck as it's passing by. We don't care anything about the driver. We filter out all private vehicles at the edge. All we care is that a truck was at a time and place. Now, the reason to do this, and there's many reasons, but I think one of the driving reasons to do that is, like you were saying earlier on, is one of the metrics that almost the compliance requirements that many freight brokerages or even shippers have had for longstanding is that, hey, you need to have at least one inspection as a carrier before we'll even look at working with you. And as those smaller carriers know, once they get their new CDL, they get their truck and they're out there on the roads, you can go up to an inspection station and you can beg to get inspected and they won't do it. They don't want, there's been too many people that have come in with squeaky clean trucks to try to get inspected and then to let that degrade over time, that those running the inspection stations, the commercial motor vehicle safety officers, they won't do it. You can't get the inspections. And therefore you're kind of left driving on the roads as a motor carrier saying, I wish people would know I exist on these lanes and I'm running this and I'm trying to get more business, and they won't broker the freight to you. And unfortunately, where that freight is oftentimes being brokered is to fictitious carriers that might have bought a motor carrier number on the internet, wherever it might be. They're now out there, or I guess posing as a motor carrier, but they actually don't have any assets. And now we have the inverse issue of someone that has this inspection back history from a carrier that went out of business, and now they're using it to try to get fraudulently get freight, and they're not actually out there on the roads. And our cameras see that as well. We see that there was a motor carrier that used to be there, it's no longer there, and therefore if you are connecting with this fictitious carrier, you're going to be able to see, hey, do they have trucks on the roads? Have they been running in the last 24 hours on that lane with that equipment? And all of this is designed to keep the bad guys out of freight so that the good guys can flourish. And that's why GenLogs exists.
There's two threads there that I want to pull. The first one is this inspection piece. So for the folks who aren't super familiar with how FMCSA operates, I'm going to kind of give a little rundown, but every single truck and trailer must get a federal inspection annually by a service provider, either their internal mechanics, external mechanics. That is not the inspection we're talking about. We are talking about you're at a weigh station. The DOT is going to do a level 1. He's going to inspect the vehicle, inspect the subframe, all this. You can't ask for them to do it like you outlined. So you have what could be hundreds of thousands of motor carriers that are operating on the highways right now that to the FMCSA, they're just a bunch of numbers, but there's been no physical inspections. And as we kind of touched on the very beginning, they don't have a ton of resources, and everything tells me they're not going to get more resources right now. So you're helping augment this by you actually can inspect these things. I mean, you have cameras that see these motor carriers, see those trucks. What level of detail are you seeing on a truck with the camera systems that you guys operate?
Yeah, the key identifiers that we collect is the DOT or the MC number, that placard on the side. Now, that kind of sets you at the carrier level. Hey, we saw that carrier at a time and place. But then we collect other types of identifiers. It could be the cab number. Sometimes the VIN numbers are exposed. That helps us, the types of data that we're collecting, get down to the VIN level on a carrier. There's a lot that unlocks with regards to being able to understand how that carrier's movements are, where they operate, how far they drove in a day. You can actually derive all of that with enough of a network out there. And that's what we've essentially built through blood, sweat, and tears over the last year, is this network that's truly coast to coast that can collect. And we have examples of literally just watching every few hundred miles as a carrier drives transcontinental from Pennsylvania all the way to California and back. We see that, so we can get a really good understanding of what those patterns are. But yeah, it really comes down to those different identifiers that if you were to look at the trucks with your naked eyes, you'd be able to pull out and say, oh, this is the name of that plaque, the name of the DOT or the carrier. We also pull out the equipment types as well as any logos and numbers on that. Now, the equipment types is really fascinating because what we're able to do, we actually run that live real time at the edge on all of our sensors. So we're now on version 7 of our equipment types, and we have everything from hoppers to cattle haulers to box trucks to loggers to you name it. And if we can train a model to see it, we can now do that. And the reason that is so important is because we can now help, whether it's brokers or shippers, when they're trying to source a carrier out there on the roads with an extremely niche equipment type that maybe has never actually been seen.
Triaxle flatbed, something like that.
You got it. Something like that. Things that I've never even heard of. And every day I'm looking up and Googling, like, what the heck are they talking about? And we'll find it, and we'll find those examples in our data that we historically saw. We'll build a model, we'll push that out. And then in real time, we can actually tell you, hey, where are all the triaxle datas or triaxle flatbeds? Who has them in Dallas right now? And we can actually show you that.
That is incredible. I mean, this is why I got so jazzed about your platform initially, was understanding that we're not measuring these things right now at scale. But once you start measuring, then you can start managing and you can take insights and drive action. Like the flatbed activity is a great indicator for home construction. There's all these different things that work together. Now, the other thread that I wanted to pull, you talked about fraud and talked about cargo theft. And I want to kind of set the stage for the audience about two different types of cargo theft we see in the business. The most common one people think about is opportunistic. The trailer is parked at the travel center. I take a cutter, I get into the back of that box, I start pulling off merchandise, and I take off. That's opportunistic. There's certain things you can do to keep opportunistic stuff away, but it still happens because it's opportunistic. The other side is this strategic cargo theft, which really is like criminal cartels operating internationally to steal motor carriers' information, pretend to be a motor carrier, being a broker instead, and then giving it to another motor carrier. Can you speak a little bit about how Genlog is tackling this strategic side of cargo theft?
Yeah, well, before I get into the strategic, let's just go to like your opportunistic cargo theft. That's something that we get involved with all the time when there was an owned asset by either a shipper or otherwise that all of a sudden does get snipped and attached at a truck stop and now it's on the roads. We have the ability now to you can put an alert out in our system that will run nationwide saying, hey, when that asset is seen, I want to be alerted. And boom, we will see it. We'll tell you who the motor carrier is that's attached. You'll see the actual images. And that latency is only a matter of minutes from when that drives by our sensors. So we know, hey, they're on 95. Let's say they just passed near Richmond. They're headed towards DC. You can get law enforcement involved and stop that in its tracks. And we've done that almost weekly now with our customers.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's been awesome. I tell you, man, I get goosebumps every time that our team throws in our Slack channel, hey, we just had another big victory where we were able to recover this type of equipment. And now it's getting really cool because we will have different customers. We had a case the other day where there was we'll get into the strategic theft piece. In fact, why don't I do it and I'll tell you this anecdote.
Yeah.
The strategic theft, as you know, but for anyone who's listening, maybe not as familiar, that's really happening when someone, like you said, these criminal syndicates or international theft rings, they are posing as a motor carrier. And oftentimes, unfortunately, this happens on load boards. Think of it as essentially Craigslist, where you kind of say, hey, I need to get something from point A to point B. And someone else says, well, I can take it from point A to point B. And that's a digital relationship. It's like online. It's like being catfished, so to say. And that is what this is. It's being catfished in trucking. And that goes on, unfortunately, so often where someone is claiming that they are a carrier. Oftentimes that they are claiming that they are a carrier because they bought the motor carrier number. They bought some of the login credentials to some of these platforms, whatever it might be. But they actually don't own any assets. They might be sitting over in Eastern Europe or elsewhere, simply controlling this through computers. So it's a digital relationship that has now been hatched. And unfortunately, these unsuspecting, whether they're freight brokers or carriers, then are asked, hey, can you go get this load, let's say over at this shipper? And essentially it's daisy chained over and this carrier goes up to pick it. And sometimes they're not even in on it and they're completely innocent in all of this. But that strategic theft has been, or also known as sometimes double brokering, involved in there, where this carrier now has this load, they go pick it up and now they are in transit somewhere else. They get a call, hey, they're asked to take that load over somewhere else, drop it off, and boom, it's gone. And sometimes even that strategic theft is now someone locally posing as a legitimate carrier. And that's really the piece that's fascinating for us and why I get so fired up about what we can do, because that posing as a legitimate carrier, Genlogs already knows what that carrier should look like on the roads. And we also know what all of the different trucks or equipment that should be paired with that carrier. And we see it all the time. You'll often see the placard side on the side of a truck it's just paper and taped. And it could be handwritten like, hey, Ryan's Trucking, and here's the number. And then boom, they pull up to a shipper and they're like, yep, sounds good, come on in. Well, that's something like we've seen what real looks like on the roads. And we've captured it all the time where we see that paper placard there on a truck that has never been seen as part of that carrier on the road. And it's the one day they have. And when that theft unfortunately happens, you know, the real victim in this, it's the shipper, of course, that lost some of the priceless, whatever they might be trying to move there. Insurance is going to cover that. And the industry is getting hurt from the raised insurance prices. But the real victim is that legitimate carrier that's doing work on the East Coast, when all of a sudden someone posing as them on the West Coast came to try to pick something up. And now there's might be a freight guard report or some type of report is put out there. Hey, this carrier just stole my load. When in reality, it wasn't that carrier. And now that carrier's name is muddied. They go on everyone's do not use list, and their entire livelihood is impacted because someone. And this is where Genlogs is uniquely poised, and something we're going to lean into in the future is our ability to say, hey, this is what normal looks like. And these are the assets we see every day running on these lanes. And now all of a sudden, this looks abnormal. And if you know my background in the intelligence community, it is what the NSA has done for years, and what anyone in cybersecurity has done for years, is look at what does normal activity on a network look like? And then when something pings abnormal, that's what we want to focus on. Something that's abnormal there. We can now do that on the roads, which is so cool. We can ensure that the physical footprint matches the digital footprint. And just like you have two-factor authentication on any type of modern types of platforms you might log in, where you're trying to log in via there and they tell you, hey, we got to log in on your phone. That's two-factor authentication. We can now do that too, to make sure the digital footprint of who you say you are is matching the physical footprint from the assets you actually have out in the roads.
This is what makes it so fascinating to me, because if I'm a shipper, I'm a receiver, and I know there's someone who's supposed to be coming, your technology could tell me the truck it's going to be, the trailer that's going to be, and you'll have probably knowing within the last sensor reading, it's going to be here in 30 minutes or something. So what you've done is you've kind of circumvented the old version of track and trace. Oh, driver said he'd be there in 30 minutes. He turned his tracking off his cell phone. I have no idea, but I think it sounds right. And you have taken the optionality out of it. You don't need them to consent to you being able to scan the trucks. This is one quick caveat before we go into your background. Many people have talked with me about your platform, about the cameras taking pictures of the trucks and the trailers. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with this, there is no reasonable expectation of privacy on the roadways. And so this is taking what is really, kind of blocking and tackling of the law with technology that can solve real problems. And this strategic theft that you kind of talked about, it has been growing astronomically. This is hundreds of times larger than it was just a couple of years ago, and it's not slowing down. So in the toolbox, there's a new tool, and that tool is Genlogs. But forget about the software for a minute. I'm done with the software, Ryan. I got to know. Tell me about the CIA.
Well, let's talk about it.
What happened? Tell me all about this.
I'm a product of 9/11. September 11th, 2001 was frankly where my story began, going down the route of doing what I could to protect the country. That's because my dad was actually in the Pentagon on 9/11, and his office was hit.
Wow.
And he tells it better than I am, but there he was, knowing that the Twin Towers had already been hit in New York, and thought to himself even, hey, we might be next. And then right then, bam, and he gets thrown back, fireball coming towards the window. By the grace of God, it was the one window that didn't get obliterated. So he was able to gather other people in the office, evacuate before the whole office descended into the inferno below. Imagine, I'm a high schooler at the time. I'm a senior trying to figure out what I'm going to do next in life. And as I've said before, I only cared about two things at the time: flirting with girls and playing basketball, and just nothing else mattered to me. But that all changed in that moment. And I remember knowing exactly where my dad's office was. And I thought for a second, he must have been gone. And it literally wasn't for about 12 hours later that he finally walked in the door, singed. And, it was just kind of a crazy day for our family. And I went to bed that night saying, I'm going to do everything I can to learn about the history, culture, language, religion of the people that would do that, and make sure it never happens again. Next step, I go off and learn Arabic in college, study abroad in the Middle East. And then I don't think I ever thought, what do you actually do when that happens? And at some point there I was, I'd studied political science, international affairs. I learned Arabic. I'd spent time in the Middle East, understood the culture, understood the philosophy, their history, all of this. And at some point the CIA came knocking and said, hey, you have a particular set of skills that we'd be very interested in employing at this time. And I would say the rest is history. But yeah, I did spend a few years in the CIA, and my job was to recruit sources primarily in those ISIS and Al-Qaeda types camps, and to provide us information about the plans of intentions of either those terrorist groups or foreign governments. That was my job.
That's incredible. To go back to 9/11, it's interesting you could bring that point up because we're the same age, same kind of moment in time. My father had been at Roadway since 1976, but he started his own business in 1991, and we were a maintenance provider for trucking companies and FedEx Ground and Steve and all those. But he was in Sacramento the day that 9/11 happened because he was spent about half his time was traveling, and all the flights were canceled. And he ends up renting a car and just driving nonstop, chewing coffee beans to get home because the one thing that a kid needs when things get strange and get conflicting is they need their dad. They need their dad. And I can't imagine the terror you must have felt thinking, is he going to come home? Because we didn't have ubiquitous cell phones. It was a whole different world back then. So now you find yourself in the Middle East recruiting operatives. Like, tell me about how long did you do that for? What would make you want to come to supply chain?
It's a great question. I did it for a number of years and I absolutely loved it. I mean, there's no greater thrill. And I've had some really good days at Genlogs. And I would say overall, Genlogs has been one of the most incredible experiences of my life. And I think it's only going to get better as goes time on. Yet there were days in the CIA where I was given this enormous mission to go carry out by myself. And I kept thinking, they're paying me to do this, to walk through the streets of these foreign capitals and looking if you're having surveillance and then meeting with these incredibly sensitive sources who are giving you information that the very next day, you're going to write a report and that's going to be on the president's desk and it's going to change policy. That was such an incredible experience, but it was also an enormous amount of trust that was put in me. But the one thing we talk about trust, and I think this is really where the parallel is for you asked, how'd you get into supply chain? Why supply chain? One of the things we did in the CIA is when you would cultivate a relationship with a source, when they would give you some information that was non-public or potentially secret, you didn't know if they were potentially a double agent or they were telling you lies. You needed to validate your sources before you could fully trust them. So what we ended up doing in the intelligence community is we would use sensors, satellites, or from hearing from other sources to validate what one source said, and that was called all source intelligence. You would take these different data streams to say, they're telling us this, is this the truth? And then you would look at sometimes that patterns of, if you think about satellite imagery, I mean, we've had that imagery for a while. You could literally ask someone, hey, tell us about this, but this compound. How many, square feet is there? How many steps is it from here to here? And you would use what they were telling us and you would look against what the ground truth was. We'll talk about the parallels to what we're doing today at Genlogs. I mean, that's why I'm in this space, is because around 2020, I decided to take a leave of absence from the US government, went into an early stage startup where we had developed some really cool technology to track people across cameras, across states and different cities. And that was used by law enforcement. It ended up pivoting into a retail analytics platform, but I knew that it was working. It was applying AI to sensors to track objects of high business value to customers. That just happened to be retail analytics in malls and shopping centers. Wasn't what I personally was passionate about, but I knew the playbook was working. So as I started to look at what might be next, one of our investors at the time was actually Ross Perot Jr., who owns Hillwood, which is a big logistics footprint all around the US. They're also with Alliance, Texas, with the BNSF facility there. And he asked us once upon a time, hey, could you do what you're doing on these people to trucks? And we decided, as a business reason not to, but I just tucked that back into my head and was like, why isn't that a solved problem? Why would he want us to know about where trucks are operating? And so when I started to decide, what am I going to do next? I started to do customer discovery, talk with different smart people in the industry, whether they were tech providers, brokers themselves, carriers. And it became so crystal clear to me two things. Number one, I thought it was crazy that you and I can look up on our phones right now, flightradar24.com, and see where every plane in the sky is, thanks to ADS-B beaconing technology. And you can look at where every ship at sea is, thanks to AIS beaconing technology. Yet despite the ELD mandate, there isn't that single source of truth to where every truck is out there on the roads. And because of that, there was a ton of inefficiency, but the fraud piece is what was glaring to me. And I realized this parallel, that I had to go recruit sources and validate what they were saying using sensor satellites or hearing from other sources to make sure that what they were telling me was consistent with the ground truth. That's two-factor authentication. Yeah. Now we had this issue with these fraudulent double brokers and all the above saying, hey, I run those lanes and I have that equipment. I'd be happy to do that load for you. That's the digital footprint. That's what you're telling us. You need all source intelligence to make sure that that is consistent, that two-factor authentication. So I like to joke with my team. I used to track terrorists, but now I track trucks. And that's what we were doing on a daily basis because it's the parallels are so clear.
Well, I think even going back to the retail analogy, I mean, the ability for retailers to stop shrink is $1 trillion a year problem for retailers. So they do have really important vested interest in trying to prevent shrink, which could happen with their own employees. It could happen with people from the outside. It could happen as a disorganized fashion or more organized. And as you look up the value chain, the same thing is happening in the transportation industry. My background had always been in the asset-based motor carriers, like the old Dominions and the Pitt Ohios. And they're not having the same strategic theft things because they're touching it with their own employees. So I didn't really understand it until I got into the truckload business and the brokerage business. And it's, oh, wait, the carrier reuse rate is not high. So a broker doesn't use the same motor carriers. And it's a lot of, did you fill out the right packet? Did you turn tracking on? Is it trucker tools, P44, four kites, whatever? And in your case, if I look at this, it's like, I don't care what you're using. I'm going to take pictures of you and I'm going to know where you are. It's incredible. When you started Genlogs, did you anticipate you would have the kind of reception that you have seen so far?
I don't think we did when we fully, truly incorporated and said, we are now Genlogs. For those that are in the know, it stood for General Logistics. And part of that is because we didn't know what we were going to be at the time, but we knew it was going to be in this space. And so over time, my two co-founders, Blake, Joe, and I just started to refer to it truncated to Genlogs. Initially the concept was actually to go out and get access to all of the Department of Transportation cameras nationwide, and then use that to look at truck patterns and do kind of, hey, how many trucks are in the Dallas market or not? We ended up getting access to about 50,000 of those cameras. We're running our AI across all of it, and it was really cool data. But when I went to some of the key stakeholders in the industry and said, hey, this is what we got, what do you think about that? They said, you know what, that could help us in certain areas. But what we really need to solve the fraud problem right now is understanding not just that a truck was in this area, but this specific truck was in the area. And we realized you could not get that through the existing Department of Transportation cameras. So we went back to the drawing board. We ended up creating our own 3-headed camera that we now have that we call the Trident sensor. And Matthew, it's the craziest story. We put one of them up on the side of 95. This is Memorial Day of 2023. It was Joe, my co-founder, and I literally precariously hanging over some barbed wire fencing, putting it on a friend's location there that he gave us authorization to put this camera. We put it there, we calibrated it, we flipped on the AI, we start to collect this data. Joe is an absolute whiz when it comes to all of this. And I took the raw data from that and I went to a company in the space that will remain unnamed right now. And I said, hey, you asked us to get more specific data. Here's the data that we got from just one day in here. And I didn't hear from him for 24 hours. And I was like, oh man, I thought they wanted that.
That's what they asked for.
I get an email in and we have a multi-million-dollar acquisition offer in our inbox saying, we want to acquire Genlogs, this little company, that does nothing yet, to come and build this inside of their company. And that for me was when the light bulb was like, oh, there's something here. And I think that's when I built the conviction that, hey, we can go down this path ourselves. We really just started on the fraud side. Like, hey, we're going to figure this out to address fraud. Since then, we've realized all the other use cases that you can address when you have all of this data. And the reason I say all of this data is if you look at Samsara, for example, one of the largest ELD providers in the space, they have like a $15 billion market cap. Yet when you ask them internally about how much market penetration they have, it's about 7 to 10%. Within the first few months of Genlogs getting our sensor network up and flipping it on, we ended up collecting on over 70% of active DOTs that were on the roads in a matter of a week. And you just saw like, oh my gosh, we have 10x the amount of data on trucks that a $15 billion company like Samsara has. What could we do with all of this data? And that's really where the light bulb started to go off. And we started to hire some really smart people under our team that had the ability to not only take our data, but fuse it with other data sets. And this gets back to that all source intelligence piece. Going back to my days in the intelligence community, we were not the best agency in the world. The CIA wasn't, just because we were American. The CIA is the best intelligence agency in the world because we've learned how to use the data we collect from different sources and bring all of that together in an all source analysis capability to provide policymakers with unequivocal assessments of what we believe is happening from what we were seeing from space, hearing from sources, listening to on phones, whatever it might be. We're bringing it all together. That's what Genlogs is positioning ourselves. So when we talk about us being the truck intelligence platform, you essentially get CIA put in your hands. And we talk about we're going to turn Jason the broker into Jason Bourne, and that's our mission here.
It's incredible because as I think about this, like supply chains exist to enable growth. And we see the supply chains that we learn from, the technologies that start getting adopted are usually in the military first. They're used for military purposes and they get brought into the broader public and become ubiquitous. But what you've done is a very similar thing. The technologies that you used to protect the country are now being used to protect freight. And I love the analogy of the Samsara piece and their market penetration. Again, for the folks who aren't like deep in the weeds of the freight world, the ELD mandate is an electronic logging device. Every single interstate motor carrier to an extent has to have these devices. There are about 1,000 of them that are actively self-certified with the FMCSA, but about 250 of them have been revoked. So there's this really weird dichotomy of like some are allowed, some have gotten revoked for various reasons. But you guys go, or again, once again, go around the problem that the industry has built, which is fragmentation of all of these different sets of data, and get the real insight, the real intelligence in the moment. Like how fast, when that camera takes a picture and I'm looking for a truck, how fast can I then see where that truck is if I'm looking for that within Genlog's platform?
It would be absolutely instantaneous if we didn't have to rely on some of our telecommunications backhaul providers, which is why the latency is normally it's 15 minutes or less from when that comes in. We're working with them to try to get that faster. We're looking at satellite-based communications. We're looking at it all to essentially get that to be truly instantaneous. Truck flies by, boom, record and image are right there. And as our network grows, there is so much more that we can do. Right now, we tell people if they want tracking, go talk to Trucker Tools now, DAT, or go talk to Project 44, someone else, because we're not in the business of breadcrumbs every few feet. And yet, then these customers will come back to us and be like, well, I don't need breadcrumbs every few minutes. I need to know when two things are happening. That carrier is going to be late or they're going in the opposite direction because
Exception
that freight's now stolen. Exception management. And that is something that we realized we can do. So we did a project with a shipper. This is months ago before our network was as robust it was now. They gave us a week's worth of their TMS data. And they said, if Genlogs had been integrated with our TMS, how many trucks would you have been able to tell us was inbound to our pickup location or tracked along the way to give us an ETA arrival time? And that was still on par. We were at 66% right then. If you ask some of the bigger visibility providers in the space, like, hey, how much do they actually do in terms of tracking for their customers? You're oscillating in that 70 to 80% rate. So we were a few months ago, almost at parity with, if you don't care about breadcrumbs tracking, then essentially, if you can imagine a future state in which sensors at every shipper, warehouse gate, distribution center, whatever it might be in the US, is now able to just log trucks in and out automatically, making sure they're the right trucks that should be coming in based on who the load was tendered to. And then understanding where that visibility is along the way. That's Genlogs 3.0. Yeah. We're still in Genlogs 1.0, 2.0 is on the horizon, but man, we have some ambitious roads ahead of us.
It's incredible because as you kind of outlined this, again, this is what I felt that I saw when I first learned of your platform and got to meet you, was that you were changing the paradigm. You were changing what I would call, for a lawyer, like, what is reasonable standard of care? What is the amount of work you should do to protect your customer's freight? Like, what is the baseline to use? And these tracking platforms, like you alluded to, that has been the common refrain, and they've had a number of issues, whether it's people using them or find ways around them. But if you're as good as what it looks like you are, you could certainly change the entire structure and say, what we do is baseline acceptable. Everything beneath that is not good enough. Have you felt pressure from the other, I wouldn't say competitors, maybe frenemies in the business? Like, hey, dude, you're making it hard for us to be successful.
At the end of the day, and I've never actually shared this publicly, so I'll do so now. When we get into the why behind what we're doing. So you asked, how'd you get in the transportation space? And like, honestly, God just kind of directed me here, and here I am. And yet, we talked about my father almost being killed on 9/11. Well, his father was killed, unfortunately, by a truck driver who was out of service with his brakes.
Oh,
This happened in Richmond, Virginia, where I live now. This is back when I was maybe, 5, 8 years old, around then. So that is something that has impacted my family, is someone that was out there on the roads that should have been and knowingly shouldn't have been. Their truck was placed out of service. And yet they said, I'm still going to run this load with a brake issue. And then boom, my grandfather was killed as a result. Well, I want to raise the standards so that can't happen to the next. I mean, I think about my dad losing his father when he was my age. I'm like, how do we make sure that never happened? One of our employees at Genlogs the other day, her mom was involved in a horrific accident by a hit and run from a truck driver who's out there. And we're still using we just finally got the footage from the dash cam, and we're now using that to track down who was this carrier that hit someone, almost killed them, and then ran away. So at the end of the day, like, I will work hand in hand with anyone else in the market, and my hand is always extended. Like, doesn't even have to be frenemy. It could be full friends. But what I will not do is allow the standards to just be artificially low, because that's easy and that's what's going to make vendors, more money. If we can elevate the standard so that you were talking about the legal term, that standard of, what was it again?
Standard of care. The
standard of care. There you go. We want to elevate the standard of care so that no one has an excuse that they were using a carrier that was knowingly ignoring these issues. And Matt, Matthew, I showed you this presentation, this Genlogs 2.0 presentation.
Yeah, I love that. That was fascinating.
And I won't get into all the details here, but the bottom line is there's some big lawsuits that have happened recently. One was dropped on a very large shipper in the U.S. Now, when we looked at, hey, who's hauling their trailers out there on the roads, I literally chose one of their carriers at random and just said, let me take a look at what's happening with this carrier. We saw that carrier have an inspection in which they, just like what killed my grandfather, they had an out of service brake issue as well as a fuel leak. And that happened on December 31st of last year at 11:42 in the morning. When we looked at where that truck was seen 4 hours later, 8 hours later, it kept driving. So the authorities had basically said, you have the potential to kill someone. We got to take you out of service. And that carrier said, I got a task to do. I want to be home by the time the ball drops, because it was December 31st, I'm going to keep driving. What you don't have is like great carriers out there on the roads, which is 99.9% of them. They're going to do the right thing. And they're going to say, look, I have this out of service issue. I got to go get it fixed. I'm going to keep my vehicles maintained so I don't even have those issues to begin with. And then there's going to be a few that are frankly going to be the bad apples. And at the end of the day, I've always said our mission is to take the bad actors out so that the good actors can flourish. And if we could have prevented, every day there's 15 people in the US killed from truck crashes, 438 people injured. If we can reduce that by a tenth, that is literally 1 or 2 more people a day that are going to come home to their families that aren't today. So again, my hands are extended to every different tech company in the space, but we're going to elevate what the standard is to be safe out there so that the good guys can flourish and the bad guys get taken out.
That's incredible. I mean, what I would kind of remind the audience about, my background is as an insurance defense lawyer many years ago, representing trucking companies in catastrophic accidents. And like I've looked at enough medical records of dead kids or maimed people, paralyzed. It's horrifying. It's horrifying. And I think it's a really interesting point you make about like just the industry generally. I don't think most people realize how dangerous this job is. Besides for drivers themselves being, again, the 8th most dangerous job in this country, the national out of service rate for commercial vehicles that are on the road right now, this number, it's over 20%.
Man. Yeah.
Over 20%, 1 in 5. And I tell people, imagine if I was a grocery store and I had 5 gallons of milk and I said, one of these gallons of milk is unsafe. You'd say, Matt, which one is it? I'd say, I don't know. You'd say, well, can I choose something different? I'd say, no, you don't. You have to choose what's available. If we think this industry is good enough now, I don't want to be a part of this business. I honestly think if you can't follow best practices, you shouldn't be in the business either. So I'm so sorry for the loss of your grandfather. I cannot imagine the terror and the fear knowing that it could be anybody. Today, it could be anyone. And the technologies exist that we can reduce these things. And so I think I'm looking forward to GenLogs 3.0, where you can see if they're missing a light or a mud flap and hit them into the DOT violation. That would be my wish list. What are
Hey,
you
can I
getting?
say something there, Matthew, when you
Yeah.
talk about that GenLogs 3.0? I would just want to be really clear for anyone that's listening here. GenLog's playbook is not to run to the plaintiffs and be like, hey, here you go. It is to get ahead of the issues before they're issues. And so it is to work with the brokers and the large carriers and this and that to let you know, hey, you have some issues here. We just want to let you know before they transpire into really big liabilities for you. And so absolutely, that's something with our cameras, we truly can look at damage to make sure, hey, is there damage in this trailer? How has that changed over time? We can look at the potential for, hey, are there lights out or mud flaps missing? All of that is stuff we can do. We want to do that hand in hand so that we're actually helping, that everyone views GenLogs as a force for good in this space. And it's not like, ha, we got you. We do not want to be the police on the roads. What we want to do is get you ahead of time. It's kind of like wearing a Fitbit to let you know that, hey, you're getting kind of overheated and maybe you need to just take a break. That's what we kind of want to be, but we want that standard of care to be high. And going back to the issue that we saw with the GenLogs 2.0, if you looked at that carrier right now and every other compliance platform out there, they are good to go. Like no one sees this. And therefore the standard is clearly not great enough because no one saw that the carrier had issues in some of these nuclear verdicts that have come down the road until it was too late. But you didn't have the data to actually see that ahead of time. That's where we want to go.
Now, I usually don't bring in the questions from the audience, but I have a couple I want to just bring up here real quickly. So here's one from one of our listeners. Does the sensor network cover all major lanes and markets in the United States?
Right now, I would say all. I will never say all because I'm probably going to say, hey, we're just never all the way there.
There's an asterisk.
Yeah, there's an asterisk. And yet, when you overlay the density of truck daily volumes out there on the roads with our sensor network, it is almost a one-to-one match. So east of the Mississippi on pretty much any major lane out there, whether it's 81, 95, 80, all of these, 65, it doesn't matter. You major interstate, major market, we have coverage there. Also on the West Coast, kind of running up into the Pacific Northwest. Dallas is a great example. I mean, you cannot get in and out of Dallas without going by multiple of the GenLog sensors there. And that's the playbook we're repeating all over in most major markets. And we're also looking at expansion to Mexico and Canada. So
what about Hawaii? Would you need me to help install some cameras in Hawaii? I'd be happy to give it a try.
Matthew, you're dressed the part today, man. So we're gonna get you on a plane, put you out there. Speaking of, just a quick aside, I last saw you in person at the MCIF conference the other day, and it was the day after the Masters. And I remember having envy about Rory McIlroy's green jacket that he just won. I walk into the conference and I see you in your red jacket, and I was like, man, screw the green stuff. How do I get that red jacket there? So that was awesome.
I love red corduroy. When I was teaching my law students, I say this phrase quite often. I don't know how people learn. Some people learn through what they hear, or what they read, what they see. If there's a PowerPoint, I try to find something that they'll remember me by. And so the red jacket always helps for people hopefully remembering the terrifying messages I bring.
Unmistakable, man. Even Rory McIlroy was jealous. So.
Well, was that your first time at the Motor Carrier Insurance Education Foundation?
It was. And this really gets to that concept of really trying to do what we can to raise the bar and standard in the industry while also working directly with motor carriers to make sure that they understand where they have some potentially problematic areas that they can address now before it gets more problem later. Stitch in time saves 9, man. And that's where we're going with this. So this was our first introduction on the motor carrier insurance space. We already have some very large clients that are insurance carriers that are using our data to just do better insurance underwriting. Absolutely. Hey, and it goes back to the fact of all of a sudden they get this packet on their desk of you have to underwrite this, and there's been 0 FMCSA inspections and no other data. What do you do at that point? In the last week alone, we saw 15,000 US DOTs out on the road that have never had inspections. And so all of a sudden now that's 15,000 more packets that would be nothing, that we now have some type of information so that they can make some type of underwriting. And at the end of the day, we hope that if we do our job well, insurance premiums for everyone lower. And let me say that again. Insurance premiums for everyone goes down. Because why are premiums high? It's because there's a few problematic issues and few problematic actors, few problematic issues. it hit me. I was chatting with one of the insurers at the conference the other day who said that 43% of the claims that they now deal with are due to fraud and cargo theft.
Yeah, exactly.
43%. That's crazy. That is a lot of time, money that they're spending in capital outlaying because a handful of these bad actors are ruining it for everyone, and everyone's getting hit with those raised premiums. So when Genlogs is wildly successful, everyone's premiums are back to 2010 levels, and let's all go hallelujah. And that's where we want to be in the long run.
You're far more optimistic than I am. I think you reduce the claim liability. I think you can solve claim liability. I don't see the premiums going down. I think that's the margin is so appealing. But I will say that this is a great example of the use case that you have outlined. So who cares about what trucks and trailers are on the road? Oh, it's everybody. Everybody should care about this. It's not just the brokers or the shippers or the receivers. It's the American public. We want the roads to be safer. We all aspire to get home in the same condition that we left. And this is the story of our supply chain. It's a hard, brutal job, but it is essential and we have to do it. Yeah. Man, what are you getting excited about? You have some interesting things coming up in the next couple of weeks, don't you, Ryan?
Yeah, well, me personally, I do. So about 2 weeks from today, I'm going to be getting married to a great gal, Casey, who's here in Richmond. That's why I moved this last weekend from DC to Richmond to, get the threshold ready to walk her across after we get married. Super excited to move into that next phase. So that's for me personally. I'm getting excited about that.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you very much, Matthew. And I think you've been married now for about 16 years or so.
Yeah, we got married in 2008. I found the woman who could tolerate me, and I just clung on and said, don't look elsewhere. I'm okay. I'm good enough.
No, I love that. Yeah, Casey's absolutely wonderful and truly a godsend. So we're getting married. I'm going to take about 2 days of a mini moon. We're going to delay our honeymoon a little bit because there's more to do with Genlogs, and we're getting right back into it. And we have Genlogs 2.0 is T-minus 80 days now from going live with all of these new features that all of our existing customers are going to be able to experience. And anyone new, we talked about standard of care moving up. Absolutely. That's where we're going with this, is we're going to raise the bar for anyone who's listening to this involved in compliance. Come get a Genlogs 2.0 demo, see where we're headed there. We couldn't be more excited.
Well, I'm excited to watch you ride this rocket ship. You guys had your Series A earlier this year. Phenomenal news. Again, a testament to the market accepting what you guys are doing. And it looks like this battle that the shippers have been fighting on cargo theft, there's finally some tools that look like they can do some great solutions. So Ryan, for those who want to learn more about you and the work that you're doing with Genlogs, where can they go to find out more?
The best starting point is our website, genlogs.io. If you're listening to this, you want to take a look, you can do /demo after that. We try to always keep a product demo live there for people to see. I know a lot of other software companies in the space like to kind of keep that so no one steals the ideas. What I say is good luck trying to build this network out there. It has been such a headache, but it's a labor of love that we do it. And our sensor deployment team has done a phenomenal job. So we try to keep a demo live there all the time. That's genlogs.io. Or you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I love to hop on with customers still, or prospective customers, to hear what are some of the pain points they're facing. Our entire product roadmap, led by Chris Chinfong, has been completely built on the backs of what customers have said they needed or want. And that's what we respond to. That's what we build. We have an incredible team across the board. And I thank God every day that I get to go to work with these amazing people to build products to solve really sticky problems for our nation.
God is good, man. I love to see you thriving. I will make sure to put links to those in the show notes here. Any conferences you're going to be at in the upcoming days and weeks ahead?
I'm taking a little conference pause myself to figure out what being married looks like. But my team has an aggressive conference schedule coming up. You'll probably, if there's a conference to be had, we should be there, is the bottom line. And especially when we cycle over next year, we'll be doing all the same in terms of Manifest, TIA, MATS, Broker Carrier Summit, F3. Look, MCIEF, I didn't expect to be there, and there we were. So we're always finding new places to be available to have direct conversation with customers. Hopefully see you too soon, Matthew. Hey, I got to ask you before we sign off.
Yeah.
You're finishing your course.
Yes.
First time. How's that gone? This is like last week or so, right?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking. This was one of the greatest professional accomplishments of my entire career. I love to talk with lawyers and non-lawyers about the law and how you navigate these things and how you kind of demystify them. And so I had the opportunity to be an adjunct law professor at Michigan State University College of Law. And over the course of my semester, we had the ability to cover everything from deregulation and automation, the longshoreman strike, every single thing under the sun, broker liability, broker transparency, nuclear verdicts, labor and employment. And these students, these are second and third year law students, they will be incredibly valuable to any firm that is fortunate enough to have them on their team. And I will say, this industry has been incredible. I was able to bring in some of my friends to speak to the class. I had Craig Fuller, I had Jason Miller, we had Ken Adamo, we had Britton Ladd, I had JJ Schickel. I mean, I had a list of some of the biggest stars and best operators this industry has. And they shared their time with my class. And I would say that it was far more work than I ever anticipated, but nothing worth doing is easy. And so I'm very grateful that the class is now over. The final papers are coming in. I'll say one quick thing that I love about my class. We wrote draft comments to the FMCSA's proposed rule on broker transparency. And then I had Ken Adamo come and talk about broker transparency. Like, it was amazing. It was amazing. So
I'm telling you, man, what a blessing you are to those students, I'm sure, and what an education they got. And if I can audit in the future, that's the course I want to spend time at. That'd be awesome.
Man, you're going to be in there next year. Like, what you're doing is so fascinating. We actually covered your company when you ran your Series A. We were talking about how fundraising works. So I should have pinged you to come visit, because I had Chad Olison in too.
Yeah. Chad's way better speaker than I am, but next year I'd love to come out and help out.
I appreciate that, man. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time with us this afternoon. We'll make sure to put all the things in the show notes. But again, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, Matthew, thanks for having me, man. Take care.
Thank you, sir. Well, that's it, everybody. Once again, we are covering the supply chain, the law, the technology that makes all of this possible. What makes Genlogs truly remarkable is not the software, it's not the hardware, it's the leadership, it's the people. But what makes them so compelling, what makes those barriers so hard to disintermediate, is the blend of the hardware and the software. The paradigm is shifting. It doesn't require your participation. But if you want to be competitive and you want to make sure that you have the best tools to deliver freight safely, on time, and undamaged, you should check out Genlogs. Now, as always, thanks to my friends at DAT. Dial a truck. I got Dat Hat. I'll be at DatCon. Can't wait to see you all there. Since 1978, DAT has been helping everybody move freight across the country. They got the data. They got all sorts of cool stuff. You should check them out. As always, thank you for tuning in. I am very fortunate to have the opportunity to come and talk to you. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll catch you again sometime, I'm sure. And then I end the thing.